In 68 AD, an ominous shadow loomed over Rome. Emperor Nero, whose life ended at a villa outside the Eternal City, had just committed suicide, leaving behind not only devastation but also an immense power vacuum. With his death, the last male line of the powerful Julio-Claudian dynasty vanished, a family that had ruled Rome for nearly a century since the time of Augustus, ensuring a period of relative peace and prosperity. Now, after a long calm, the once unshakable empire once again stood on the brink of bloody civil strife. In this critical moment, the Senate and the influential Praetorian Guard, seeking to prevent chaos, hastily elevated the distinguished General Galba to the imperial throne. By then, he was 70 years old, an advanced age for the time, but he was one of the most revered and experienced Romans of his era. Nevertheless, his reign, as would soon become clear, would be fleeting and dramatic, for he was destined to be the first emperor in the turbulent period that came to be known as the Year of the Four Emperors. Galba, whose lineage was not tied by blood to the Julio-Claudian house, hailed from an ancient and celebrated patrician family. He was born on December 24, 3 BC, in Terracina, Italy. From a young age, he demonstrated exceptional abilities, rapidly ascending the ranks of the cursus honorum, the Roman career ladder. By 30 AD, he held the position of praetor, and by 33 AD, he attained the consulship, one of the highest honors in Republican and Imperial Rome. Afterward, he successfully governed various provinces, accumulating invaluable experience as an administrator and military commander. A turning point came when the governor of Germania, a certain Catullus, became involved in a treasonous plot to assassinate Emperor Caligula. The conspiracy failed, and Catullus was executed. Galba was then entrusted with taking the reins of power over this restless province. The previous governor was known for his excessive leniency and indulgence toward the soldiers, which had led to a complete breakdown of discipline. It was said that pampered commanders sat in their forts while Germanic barbarians freely conducted devastating raids into Gaul. But Galba was an unyielding proponent of strict discipline. With an iron fist, he restored the combat readiness of the frontier troops, hardening both seasoned veterans and new recruits through grueling maneuvers and harsh training, and decisively halted the barbarian incursions into Gallic lands. For his outstanding services, he was lavishly showered with honors and recognition by Emperor Caligula himself. After Caligula's death, Galba was offered the throne, but possessing a rare sense of duty, he refused this tempting opportunity and unwaveringly maintained his loyalty to the new emperor, Caligula's uncle and successor, Claudius. For this demonstrated loyalty, he was rewarded not only with sincere gratitude but also with the new ruler's unbreakable friendship. In 44 AD, Galba assumed the duties of proconsul of Africa for a 2-year term. The appointment was necessitated by significant instability in the province, and he was entrusted with the crucial mission of stabilizing it and suppressing any pockets of discontent. He carried out his mission with relentless determination, not shying away from harsh measures, yet consistently demonstrating exceptional and meticulous attention to the principles of justice. In recognition of his numerous and outstanding services to the state, displayed in both the Germanic lands and on the African continent, he was granted triumphal ornaments. These distinctions acquired special significance because, since the time of Emperor Augustus, no one except the reigning Caesar himself was permitted to conduct a full triumph in Rome. Thus, triumphal ornaments served as a symbolic testament to a triumphal deed performed, even if the actual ceremony in the imperial capital was not held. Following this period, Galba led a relatively secluded life, essentially in a kind of honorable retirement, until Emperor Nero recalled him to service, entrusting him with the governorship of Hispania Tarraconensis. For 8 years, he administered this province, initially demonstrating considerable ambition and genuine enthusiasm. However, it seems he exhibited undue harshness in punishing crimes. A telling example of his approach is the story of a man who murdered his ward to seize his inheritance and desperately pleaded with Galba for mercy, exclaiming, "I am a Roman citizen." In response to this plea, Galba, without flinching, coldly declared, "Let this citizen be hanged higher than the rest, and let his cross be whitewashed." Over time, however, traits of apathy and inactivity, bordering on a kind of laziness, began to appear in Galba's character. Some historians believe that this behavior was a conscious strategy designed to give Emperor Nero no pretext whatsoever for disciplinary action. It is known that Nero methodically sought to eliminate anyone distinguished by noble birth or outstanding achievements, seeing them as potential threats to his power. When Galba received news of Nero's lethal intentions toward him, he immediately allied himself with Vindex. The latter was already actively conducting secret negotiations with provincial governors, ascertaining their readiness to support a rebellion against the despotic emperor. Thus, Galba not only joined the revolt against the reigning Caesar but also initiated the dispatch of calls for support to all cities in his province. Those cities that showed hesitation, delaying the provision of necessary troops and payment of taxes, faced extremely severe measures. Galba mercilessly ordered the demolition of their city walls and defensive fortifications, and executed not only local officials but also their families, demonstrating ruthlessness toward those who did not show complete loyalty. After Vindex was defeated by the governor of Upper Germania, Galba found himself in an extremely difficult position. He was overwhelmed by deep despair and even seriously considered suicide when, suddenly, messengers arrived from the imperial capital, Rome, with shocking news: Nero was dead, and the people had proclaimed Galba their new emperor. With the active assistance of Otho, who at that time served as governor of Lusitania, Galba immediately marched towards Rome. Upon entering Italian territory, on the very outskirts of the Eternal City, he encountered a strange military formation, which may have been assembled by Nero. Galba, without hesitation, ordered his infantry to attack this crowd, and a bloody massacre soon followed. Placing all blame for the incident on the military, Galba publicly subjected the implicated cohorts to decimation in front of all Rome. Decimation was an ancient and exceptionally cruel form of punishment, in which every 10th man was chosen by lot and then beaten to death by his own comrades. This was a punishment that often did not punish the true instigators of the crime committed. Galba, however, realized this and, to ensure maximum retribution, ordered the execution of those soldiers he considered most culpable anyway. Upon entering Rome, Galba began his reign with a large-scale confiscation of funds that Nero had previously generously distributed to his friends and supporters. He mercilessly condemned people of all ranks to death, doing so without any judicial process and without compelling evidence of their guilt. It is noteworthy that while Nero was never considered an exemplary ruler, he nevertheless shared many interests of common people. He had a passion for chariot racing, loved theater and gladiatorial games, and, importantly, knew how to put on a spectacle for the public. Galba, in contrast, viewed all this as a waste of time, and more importantly, as a reckless squandering of state funds. Many provincial governors and military commanders who did not immediately swear allegiance to Galba after his ascension to the throne were severely punished. They were forced to pay onerous punitive taxes or even condemned to execution. The Praetorian prefect Nymphidius had previously persuaded the Praetorian Guard to desert Nero, promising them a generous reward for doing so. However, Galba never paid the promised money, stating, "My custom is to recruit soldiers, not to buy them." Unlike previous emperors, who traditionally paid significant sums of money to the troops upon their ascension to the throne, Galba refused this practice. Nevertheless, he rewarded those troops who had remained loyal to Vindex, which naturally caused deep resentment among the legions of Germania, as it was they who had defeated Vindex as a usurper. These legions emphatically refused to swear allegiance to the new emperor. They even sent a letter to the Praetorian prefect, asking him to remove Galba. At that moment, there was no governor in the province of Lower Germania, and Galba sent a man named Vitellius there. He was a corpulent, gluttonous man, lacking any experience in commanding troops. It was presumed that he received this position precisely because he posed no threat, in the hope that weak and unstable command on his part would neutralize any potential danger emanating from that region. However, despite his physical bulk and lack of military talent, Vitellius proved to be an exceedingly sociable and personable individual. He quickly won the affection of the Rhenish legions, who immediately proclaimed him emperor and began their march south toward Rome. When Galba turned 70, he had no sons capable of inheriting the imperial throne. Many at the time expected him to adopt Otho, his loyal comrade and staunch supporter. However, Galba had entirely different plans. Otho was known for his extreme closeness to Nero and participated in his most ruinous vices. Galba had no intention of handing over the reins of power to a man with a character as dubious as the previous ruler. Instead, he adopted a certain Piso. Lacking other options and without adequate support from military units, Otho decided to bribe the Praetorian Guard, who, in turn, showed very little loyalty to the new emperor, who had failed to pay them the promised generous rewards. Ultimately, on January 15, 69 AD, Galba and Piso fell victim to assassins in the Roman Forum. Galba ruled for only 7 months, after which Otho was proclaimed the new emperor of Rome. The renowned historian Tacitus remarked of Galba, by general consent, he was capable of ruling the empire, had he not ruled. The biographer Suetonius confirms this view, stating that his popularity and prestige were greater when he was winning than when he was ruling the empire. Apparently, Galba acted extremely unwisely, perhaps swept up by excessive overconfidence after ascending the imperial throne, and clearly underestimated the critical importance of military loyalty. And the adoption of Piso was a fatal step that hastened his downfall. Galba was often called a harsh, stern old man, and this, it seems, is a very apt description.